is, speaking of recording, there it goes. You'll get a link in a few days, which will have the link to the recording. It'll have the presentation, as well as the credit information for our today's session. As always, when I speak, if you have questions, please put them in the chat, and we'll get to them as fast as we can. I've been speaking to HR groups for years about talent, and the common reaction I get when I do that is, I wish my CEO was here, or my CFO was here, or my leadership team was here. Well, in 2023, I did a lot of keynote speaking to a lot of large audiences, mostly CEO audiences, and it was kind of ironic. The common reaction was, I wish my HR leader was here. And so it's very interesting. And so for that reason, next April 11th and 12th, for those of you in the Raleigh market, we are bringing back our big 2-day HR conference, which is 2 full days of bringing in thought leaders from around the country. Excited about that. But day 2, the morning of day 2, is going to be several sessions where we're going to encourage you to invite your C person, whether it's a CEO, CFO, COO, whatever the C people you have, to talk about this very topic, about the rapid change all around us in the business world and what that means from a business standpoint and also from a HR talent standpoint. Again, do we see it as an opportunity, or is it a threat and a challenge? So that's going to be next April. So okay, so today what we thought we'd do to kind of wrap the year up here is to give you some insight as to what I've been saying to all these CEOs out there in these keynotes, and really about 3 or 4 points I want to make today. I've been talking to them a lot about the pace of change, how the pace of change for business is just not going to slow down, and we just aren't going to return to prior levels of available talent. When will it go back to the way it used to be? Probably never. And that really requires a mindset shift. We'll talk about it today. It really requires us to move beyond just thinking about the employee experience. That's a big part of it. And then lastly, it really is going to force us over the next few years to talk about how we might transform work. So that's kind of my roadmap for today. Again, questions at any time, I'll be happy to take them. All right. Let's see here. I always start with this slide here. You think about for my generation, work for many of us was kind of a place to go and escape the craziness of life. We kind of had work figured out. We did the same things the same ways for years and years and years and years. And obviously the last, 5 years or so, we've seen tremendous change all around us as consumers. How we bank. I spoke last week to the Credit Union Association. That world is changing a lot, as you can imagine, from younger generations. They don't have a bank or a credit union. They just, it's online for them. They've had to rethink how they do that. Of course, Amazon. Can you imagine thinking about inventing Amazon 10 years ago and the notion of getting packages every day? I actually live within 10 miles of 2 Amazon warehouses. I mean, most of my stuff comes same day now, if not next day. So that wouldn't have been a possibility, unless you're paying a lot of money for it. And even then it was going to be 2 days later, right? Uber, the concept of an Uber, Lyft, or an Airbnb, how we consume TV, music, news. I mean, think about the music industry and what they're going through now with streaming, the TV industry, streaming, how we communicate. I was looking the other day through kind of a history of communication. You go back 100 years and think about how communication has changed from having a phone to then an email, or fax was first, then a phone, then an email. And look at us today. We have, 4, 5, 6 different applications that are pinging us all day long with notifications, whether it be Teams or WhatsApp or Messenger or whatever it is, plus all your social feeds. Tremendous changes now in how we communicate, and the expectations of us of being kind of always on. Back in my generation, it wasn't unusual to see people carrying 2 cell phones around, right? There was a work cell phone and there was a personal cell phone, and those 2 shall not meet, right? And now we actually have policies about it, but not bringing your own devices to work. And now it's almost flipped upside down. That's weird to see somebody with 2 cell phones. I still see it, but for most people, we're using 1 device, and that device is always with us. And so it's the notion of being off of work for all levels of positions, not just the exempt employees, but even non-exempt is definitely changing tremendously. So the point of all this is all this change around us in the world that we can't escape is now in the workplace. And many parts of those changes are now with us in the workplace, whether it be things like the Great Resignation. We've all experienced hiring shortages. We've obviously the last 2 years, rising wages and the resulting salary compressions. Obviously, hybrid, virtual, whatever you call it, it's a big issue now. We've seen tremendous demographic shifts. We've seen quiet quitting. We've seen this knowledge loss. All these things are happening now in the workplace to where it's really creating for us tremendous change. And when we ask CEOs about this, survey after survey after survey after survey, you see things like talent shortages, obviously being the number one reported challenge. I was at a group in Greenville a few weeks ago, and they surveyed the CEOs there, and the number one challenge for all of them by far was the availability of talent. Not just availability of talent, but also the loss of talent, the loss of key people over the last 2 to 3 years with retirements. We know that in this world right now, in the United States at least, 10,000 boomers retire, or at least hit 65 every day. And we'll do that for the next 10 years. So tremendous aging of the boomers, and many of them are retiring. Obviously, demographic changes, wage inflation. So all these things are happening. A big one that's happening, though, is also industry disruptors. I spoke a month ago at the Concrete Association, the Ready Mix Concrete Association down in Greenville, South Carolina. And you would think concrete, that changed. Oh my gosh, tremendous change in that industry with how it's made, how it's distributed. There's a whole green concrete initiative, tremendous change with precast concrete coming from other countries. Obviously, a lot of retirements now. The point being, a lot of industry disruptors are happening in almost every industry. You think of remote surgeries, for example, in the healthcare space, there's just very few industries now that can say we're still doing things the same way today that we did them 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago. I'm not saying there aren't any, but for the most part, every industry, I mean, think about something as basic as taxi cabs, been doing the same way for hundreds of, well, look at that with Uber and whatnot. I haven't been in a taxi cab in, God, in years. So employees often want more and they often bring less. So all these things are happening to us, which is forcing us to rethink several things. So today I want to talk about really 3 things that we're having to really to think about now as leaders of our companies. Obviously finding talent's a big challenge, retaining talent's a big challenge, and then adapting to this tremendously changing conditions. And I'm going to, again, as I said earlier, talk about, what has to happen in our companies for us to not only survive this, but to thrive in this. I was speaking at a workforce development board meeting a year ago, and we got through with our presentation, and I just kind of hung around online. I didn't know if I was supposed to leave or not. And the first person speaking after me was an HR leader, big company in the Triad area. And she was just really just confused. I don't know what to do. She said, I've got everything I know how to do to attract talent. The things that have always worked are not working anymore. And I don't know I don't know what to do. And so I think we're going to talk about kind of today how to address that, talk about retaining, and also talk about how to transform. But I can't say enough that I really believe that whether or not you thrive through this is really going to depend on the mindset of HR and the mindset of your leaders. I again speak to a lot of groups, and these really people are really set in three different categories. And I believe this, and I believe that 75% of solving, if you will, the talent issue really is about this chart right here. And that is, what is the mindset of your leadership team? Pick the numbers, but 40% of companies that I talk with, and at Catapult, we get 20,000 calls a year. So a lot of conversations. A good number of employers still fall in this first group here. I kind of call it hope and denial. Oh, this whole thing is fake news. We're going to return to normal soon. We've made a few changes, but hey, young people are lazy. They're at home with their parents. They don't want to work. They want to start on day 3. They want a promotion to vice president on day 4. All these things. Our industry has to operate this way. We can't afford to change. I spoke to the big construction group. We're construction, obviously, building a house is, but even that industry, a lot of changes going on now. And so this is where one place that you might find yourself or your company. We're kind of this hope and denial, hoping that things will kind of get back to normal soon, or denying that there's really a problem with talent. And I tend to find these companies are struggling right now. They're really struggling to make their way through. A lot of these companies are closing or getting bought. And it's hard to compete now when looking at what's going on around us in the economy, in the world, in our workplaces, and expecting that we're going to go back to normal at some point in time is it's not going to happen. Most companies I run across now are in the second group, which is they're doing everything they can to be more competitive. I.e. they're adapting. They're raising wages. They've improved benefits. They've added perks. According to Gartner, 58% of organizations that employ frontline workers have invested in improving their employee experience in the past year. Again, 58%, and about a third of those who haven't. So of the 40% that have, again, that 40%, remember I said that, and that kind of hope denial, half of them plan to do that in the next year. So I mean, again, companies are trying their best to be more competitive and be an attractive place for employees to come to or to stay at. And then lastly, though, the last group I see is people who are transforming. A lot of companies move through this to where they start in hope denial. They try to be more competitive. And then even when they've done all kinds of things, a lot of companies are still finding that that's still not enough to attract and retain. And then we move into really transforming the how, when, where, and what of work. And we're going to kind of walk through this today, these last two phases today, and talk about like what are companies doing to be more competitive. Hopefully, I hope you'll gain a few new insights there. And then lastly, we'll talk today about for those companies that have tried it all and they're still not being successful at attracting or retaining, or at least for certain kinds of jobs, starting to transform how they actually do work. I'm sure you've seen this. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but I think suffice it to say the talent shortage is real. We feel it, low unemployment. We feel it that in the United States alone, that 3/4 of employers are struggling to fill positions. Just 2030 sounds like a long way away. It's only 6 years away. Global talent shortage of 85 million people. Again, most industries it affects that. It's gotten so bad that remember the song in the 80s, sign, everywhere signs, that long-haired freaky people can actually now apply. This used to be a lyric to a song, but again, just a little humor there. So start with these two charts here. If you take nothing else away from today, I hope you take away these two charts right here, because this is really speaking to those who might believe we're going to return at some point to the way things used to be. Look at the first chart there, U.S. population, the working age population, age 15 to 64. You can see there what's happening to it. 2000 was at a peak, and ever since 2000, you can see year in, year out, it's been going down and down and down and down. And you can see as you move out there into 2030, which again is not a long way away. In 2030, we're back down to levels of 1955, and it gets worse from there. And so again, why that's happening, part of the reason is this chart on the right here, that our country has experienced 49 of the last 50 years, we've had below replacement birth rates. Think about that, below replacement birth rates. So it's a fact that we are not reproducing enough to replace ourselves. Some parts of the country, you can see that are worse than others. You can see North Carolina, we're toward the bottom down there as far as birth rates. So we know for a fact that younger generations are not having as many children as their parents and grandparents did. And that is clearly affecting the sheer availability of talent that's out there. So when I get asked a lot, well, what's the solution for talent? You know, what I start with, well, there's the reality that for some of your jobs, you may not have people, period. You think about pretty much the entire trades industry, the skilled trades industry, electricians, plumbers, carpenters, etc. I mean, my generation, you know, we went to college, you know, and so a lot of people my age did not go to community college. It's changing now, but there is a tremendous gap there of I talk to employers a lot who just there aren't people there. And so what do you do in that scenario? So I want to start here with demographics are partly to blame for this issue. So waiting for things to get back to normal, it may never get back to normal from a demographic standpoint. Now, we're lucky in this state in that we have a lot of in-migration, people coming to our areas of the South there. Of course, not just North Carolina. We're probably fourth or fifth destination state on there behind Texas and Florida and South Carolina. But still, we do benefit from a lot of immigration. You might imagine if you're in the Northeast right now or the Midwest, tremendous migration of people out of those areas, moving south for various reasons. If you're curious about where they're coming from, you can see here, it's pretty obvious where the bulk are coming from, the Northeast up there. In other words, who's coming, where are people coming to North Carolina from? You can see a lot of people move down to Florida and then come back to North Carolina because it's too hot in Florida and too crowded. But you can see a tremendous immigration to our state from other areas. So that's partly helping us, but still going back to this chart right here, it will not make up for this problem right here. Yes, it's helping us, which is good in the short term, but in the long term, it does not change the fact that we are not reproducing at a rate, to have enough talent. So, you think about things like immigration, international migration, or immigration becomes more important for us as a country as we go forward. All right. And of course, you all know about the labor force and unemployment being very low right now. So what do we know then? We know that the older population will grow at double the rate of the population as a whole. We know, like I said, every single day right now, 10,000 people turn 65 in this country every single day, and will do so through 2032. So basically for the next 10 years. So tremendous amount of retirements happening right now. And with that, you think about the small business world, tremendous transfer of wealth right now, tremendous transfer of ownership. There are I know so many people that own their own companies whether they're plumbers or electricians or they're in advertising, whatever it is, and they've got no one to sell their business to because their kids don't want it or whatnot, or they didn't have kids. Again, by 2029, 1 in 5 North Carolinians will be 65 years old or more. And by 2031, again, not too long from now, more older adults than children in this state. So tremendous, tremendous change here. And then again, lastly, the median age will be to 42 by 2050. So point in all that is tremendous change in the demographics of the workforce, of the population. Then you add on top of that what happened during COVID. This is a stat here that I saw the other day. 6 in 10 American workers say the COVID-19 pandemic changed what they value about a job or career. 6 in 10. I spoke last week to the credit union leaders, and someone said 6. I thought the number's more like 8. Their experience is more like 8 in 10. All levels of people, all changing what they value. I can tell you a lot because I live half the month down at the coast. I can tell you down there is no off season anymore. It's crowded there all year round. It's putting a lot of strain and stress on the industry and businesses and support areas down there. They're not used to it because people have moved to the beach or the mountains or wherever it is and redefine how they work. You all know these two trends of quiet quitting, minimum amount of work, or a new one now, act your wage. Again, doing the job you're paid for, nothing more. So all these things are now showing up in the workplace. And when you ask kind of the question, where are the workers? The bottom line is, number one, we've talked about low population growth. We've talked about below replacement birth rates, a tremendously aging population. All the boomers that happened after the war are now retiring, and they're out of the workforce now. For many of them are. Again, we've seen declines in elderly workforce participation. That was going up, but COVID changed a lot of that. Again, we've seen young people decline labor force participation as well. Mike Walden, you may know who Mike Walden is. He's a local economist on the news several times a month. I've seen his face so many times during my lifetime. He tracks this a measure around upskilling or reskilling, and he's done so for 25, 30 years. He's never seen a higher rate of upskilling than what happened over the last 2 years during COVID. meaning people going back to school, going back to get a certificate or back to get some kind of education, so that when they came out of the pandemic, i.e. came back to work, they were ready for a different kind of job. And many of them ended up leaving and going somewhere else because they couldn't find that job at their current employer. Again, we talked about skills jobs and kind of employees where they are now. So the reality right now for us is talent is a scarce resource. And that is a principle in economics called resource scarcity. And I think if you think about your businesses, we've all been there, particularly during COVID. We had supply chain disruptions, and those types of disruptions got the attention and got the top of mind attention of all of our leaders. And we did whatever we had to do to try to find workarounds to supply chain disruptions, or whether it be capital disruptions or whatnot. And I guess my message today is we need that same level of attention right now with talent, because it is a scarce resource. All right, let's move into this recruiting. Obviously, you knew where to find people back in 2006, but where are you looking today? Because the whole attracting talent has changed a lot over the last several years. I think to start with, it requires us to move beyond compliance. I still see we look at a lot of recruiting processes, and a lot of them still look like something an attorney drafted for them, things you can't do, can't say, whatnot. And while that's important, the more important thing today is we've got to find the right talent. And in today's world, just the ante, you've got to have competitive total rewards. I see a lot of advertisements online that say some version of offering competitive pay and benefits. Boy, oh boy, that is, if yours says that, I would rethink that. That is required now. If you're not offering competitive total rewards, and when I say competitive, and you know that because you're looking once or twice a year at data, we have to be there. If you're not there, you almost have no chance today to compete for talent. Other things we're seeing from best practice, we're seeing a lot of employers now considering downskilling. Probably one of the biggest movements now around this is, the word downskilling sounds negative, but it's basically it's reassessing requirements to see, do we really need a high school or a college degree for that job, or a 2-year degree for that job, or X number of years of experience. One big, we had a 65th anniversary last week, and I was talking to someone from Veteran Affairs who was there, and she confirmed this, that a lot of employers say they can't find military retirees, but in this state, 24,000 military professionals retire every year. Again, 24,000 every year in the state, but a lot of their skill sets don't align exactly. The words they use, the acronyms they use don't align exactly with our openings. And we have kind of those two ships kind of pass in the night. And yet it's a tremendous pool of applicants for us. So consider not only downskilling, but rewriting how we advertise for our job, what we say is required, the words we use. There's a group called NC for Me, NC, the number 4 me, and they help companies actually rewrite their advertisements and their job descriptions to fit and attract and speak to the military population. Another big thing there, which I find interesting from a recruiting standpoint, is not only the 24,000 military professionals retiring, also their spouses or their partners as well. A lot of companies can be leery of, I don't know if I want to hire a military's spouse or partner because they're going to be transferred around probably. A lot of companies that we work with have found creative ways to utilize, to both attract, to go after and try to attract military spouses. We had one of our members was at one of our meetings here in Raleigh a month or so ago, and they do hats. And I saw a very interesting speech at the NC CEO Forum this year about what's happening in the kind of shirts and apparel industry, particularly the team apparel industry. You think about, I think about all the years we were on soft baseball fields and t-ball fields, and of course the team has a jersey, right? Used to be you went downtown, you went to the jersey store, and you got a jersey, and it was all the same color with had the team logo, and on the back it had someone's name maybe. And now a big trend now is personalized jerseys and personalized hats and whatnot. And so you're seeing all these companies pop up everywhere with the ability to very quickly process apparel, custom apparel for teams and whatnot. Well, what this company's done with COVID, they now manufacture, if you will, hats around the country. They have employees in their homes who are custom making these hats. It's very interesting, and the company supplies the machines and the material. You've heard at some of our conferences in the past, the company called R Riveter does the same thing. They make purses out of military fabric, and again, they have hundreds of seamstresses around the country, many of them military spouses. So it's just very interesting what's happening there with alternate candidate pools and just thinking differently about how we do our work as a way to attract people. I was talking to a company last week. They're now in the middle schools. They're actively involved in the middle schools, trying to get middle schoolers interested in the types of careers they offer, that their industry offers. So again, used to be about community colleges, then it was about high schools. Now it's about middle schools. So again, moving way up the talent chain. Because again, thinking back to what we talked about earlier, demographics and whatnot, you may be in an industry where the people just aren't even going to be there. Obviously, from a candidate experience, this is tremendously important now. We're seeing a lot of investment by companies in the whole candidate experience. And of course, the primary word there is web easy. Simple, mobile, friendly, no duplication of effort. You're asking for succinct information. Think like an Amazon world, which goes so against what HR, what I practiced for most of my career, which was, hey, the company has the job, the candidate needs to go through many hoops to convince us they're worthy. And that was the kind of the way of HR for many decades. And that's one example of something that's upside down now, how it used to be. So if you're like me, you still think back to the days where the candidates had to prove themselves, and it was hard to get a job somewhere intentionally. That's not the case anymore. It's an Amazon world, quick interviews, technology, web easy, and quick answers. This notion of waiting weeks and weeks to get answers, you've probably lost that person. So tremendous, again, alternate candidate pools that we mentioned in the military. We're seeing some interest in criminals with minor offenses. Disabled persons is a huge source out there. Here's a big one right now. Remember, I mentioned how one of my slides, the tremendous aging of the population, the number of retirements. If you believe what we read about the average 401k balance of most Americans, it's very low, something like below $30,000. And so what we tend to find, a lot of people retire, they don't have the beach house in the Virgin Islands. They don't. They retire, they go home, and after a few weeks, they're what? They're bored, looking for things to do. And so you might think about, how can we creatively employ retirees? Right now, there are 36% of the U.S. workforce, 36% of the U.S. workforce are in freelance/gig jobs. And again, rewind the clock 5 years ago, 10 years ago, you'd never predicted that. So retirees are in a form of in a gig world. They don't want to work full time, but they've got a lot of knowledge. And they could be a tremendous source. I was speaking at that same workforce development board meeting, and a gentleman in there was panicked by saying he was a large manufacturer, name brand company, that some big number, like 60% of all of his skilled maintenance mechanics, electricians, were going to be retiring in the next 2 or 3 years. And they were having no success or limited success finding people, again, thanks to demographics and people, not that big gap we talked about. And so I asked him, I said, have you thought about retirees? Have you thought about, if you're going to lose, in his word, that was about 70 or 80 mechanics. I bet you a large number of them would like to work some, maybe a day a week kind of a thing. And it was just, no, we don't believe in that. You either work full-time here or you don't work here. I'm like, well, I get that. That was the way of the past, but you might consider, could 3 or 4 of them share a job, for example? Job sharing is nothing new. It's gaining popularity again, but you might think about that. Again, I mentioned freelancers. That's one where we had to be real creative. Obviously, the wage and hour laws are not on our side sometimes, but a lot of industries are now thinking about how might they employ gig workers to do various parts of their operations. Talking about a lot of weekend work and off hours work and whatnot. Tremendous change now with internships and apprenticeships. I mean, apprenticeships are now in many jobs, many industries. It's not just electricians and mechanics and whatnot anymore. It's we're seeing them in IT, in cyber, we're seeing them in finance, we're seeing them in a lot of different types of jobs. So don't overlook apprenticeships. It's not just something that happens in manufacturing. It can happen for any kind of job, and there's funds out there and that you can take advantage of to make it work for both you and the people. Obviously, one big thing we're seeing in recruiting is data, and we've seen some employers now starting to utilize census data to really start figuring out where people are living, where they're moving to, where they're commuting to. All that data is available, and we've seen employers figure out. I've had a few members that they've gotten really creative with this and have figured out that where a lot of people are moving to, they've gone in those areas and gotten real involved in the chambers and really involved in the community, and found creative ways to get people to come work for them. But it's all about going where the people are. And so I definitely encourage you to keep that in mind, as you are looking for new ways to recruit and attract. Again, I come from a world where the employer had the job, the employer had the power, and it was a privilege to work for us. And that is just not where we are right now. So keep that in mind as you're trying to find talent. Maybe you picked up one or two new things today. Obviously, when you think about retaining, tremendous incentive for us now to keep people as long as we can. Again, with so many people quitting, don't overlook those who stay. These turnover rates are just killing. And look at these rates here. 80% down to 20% in government, which is kind of interesting. But you can see how 60%, 50%, we are losing a lot of people to retirements. I still hear reports from employers of losing employees for tremendous raises, 20%, 25%, 30%. This is after we've raised our wages 15, 20% over the last 3 years or so. So it's still happening. So what can we be doing then to try to retain? Data is out there, which is really interesting. You can see now 20% of new employees leave their company in the first 45 days. You all know the ghosting process we all hear about, 31% by the 6th month, 10 times more likely to quit around their first anniversary than their 5th. The average employee now is 4 years. In my generation, if you hop jobs every 3 to 4 years, we would overlook you. That was our number one thing we would screen for many, many years of my career was loyalty. Were you loyal or not? And if you were hopping around, something was wrong with you. You just can't take that mindset anymore. It's the norm now. Again, this is kind of scary. 45% of employees are now searching for a new position. 45%. Again, you go back over here and you ask, why is this happening? Well, if almost half our employees are looking or thinking about it, 4 million quit every month in 2022. It's just not what it used to be. So 2 concepts here you hear a lot about. One is the employee experience, right? Now I'm going to start, Joni, if you're still with me, I'm going to attempt to do a poll. Now, the poll, I'm just curious about this. Joni, can you put that poll up there? Oh, there it is. Take a quick second. Please answer this poll. Be honest that we're not going to share this data with anybody. It's not going to go out on the news anywhere. It's just between us here. Again, in the last 12 months, or when how recently have you conducted some kind of a survey, engagement, an opinion survey, a pulse survey, a Gallup Q12, whatever it is. Don't focus on the employee engagement part of that. It's just you've asked your employees in the last win around what they feel about work, their thoughts, their opinions. Just curious. I'll give another few seconds here. And I'll be curious to see what the results are. Johnny, let's put some results up here if you've got enough. All right. I'm so impressed we're doing this. All right, so let's look at this. I got to look over here, so I'm off screen now. So in the last 12 months, 60% of people on this call have done some kind of survey in the last year. 27% more than a year ago. So it looks like about 30, 90% or so have done so within the last couple of years, and then 14% have never done one. So clearly, from again, concept one we hear a lot about. Thank you, Joni, is the employee experience. I'm so proud we got that done. We did it the last minute. So congratulations to me and Joni. All right. So employee experience is one concept here a lot about. Employer of choice is another one we'll talk about in a minute. But again, a lot of articles, a lot of webinars, a lot of thought leadership now around kind of the employee or EX or the employee experience. And you know, if those of you like me that's been studying HR for many, many years, went to school for it, I grew up in it. There was a thought leader, Peter Drucker. Peter Drucker was the person that started this debate many, many years ago. And the debate went something like this, you know, you think about any employer, you've got three primary groups. You've got investors, you've got customers, and you've got employees, right? And we started this discussion about who's more important for an employer. Is it the investors who give you the money and keep giving you money? Is it your customers who buy your product, or is it your employees? And for years and years and years, decades and decades, you know, scholars have debated that. I'm not looking to solve it today, but I think clearly now what's happened over the last 5 years, 10 years, I mean, COVID didn't start this, but it definitely accelerated it, that now employees are at the center now. And the advice is to treat your people, i.e. your employees, better than your best customer. That has not always been how we view things. I think most people would have leaned towards the customer being the critical part of that. With no one to sell your product to, there is no business. But definitely seeing a shift over the last few years. To my point with my survey there, checking in frequently. I don't care what form you use. It doesn't have to be an official, formal, 50-question, whatever survey, but it's critical that both from a day-to-day standpoint with your supervisors, you're training your managers to have one-on-ones, regular check-ins with employees, but also formally, at least annually, we're checking in with our employees just from a survey standpoint, just to see where they are, because this is changing so rapidly. The world is, people's mindset is, you just can't rest on a survey from 2 or 3 years ago. Again, we used to advise that, by the way, but that's another change, and this happened to us. We now advise it once or twice a year, checking in. I love this. I'm stealing this from a speaker we had at one of our conferences this year around Jim Morgan from our sister group in Wisconsin. Jim Morgan says, it's not a benefit if I don't think it's a benefit. You think about, again, my generation was about pension plans, was about the gold watch, was about one healthcare plan, then became it became a cafeteria plan, but a cafeteria plan with very few options. And you think about now, you know, think about your workforce, and you've probably got 4 or 5 generations in your workforce right now. And we know that if I'm 25 years old, do I care about healthcare and retirement and elder care and life insurance? No, I care about repaying student loans, and I care about getting to work, maybe Uber and transportation. And so I think what we're advising, we're seeing a shift now is with employers looking at a very diversified portfolio of benefits, but not just within the confines of a 125 plan, but spanning a wide variety. I've got a slide in a minute to show you some of the neat things people are doing in the benefit space, from Uber accounts and rolling payments to all kinds of things that aren't just in the 125 portfolio. But again, it's not a benefit if I don't think it is. And so if you're going to attract a different kind of person to come work for you, you got to think about, what do those people value that you're trying to attract. And then I'm not saying that you offer all these things, and we know it. I wouldn't care about repayment for loans at my age, but I would care about retirement or more vacation time. And so you see this diversified portfolio being very attractive to different types of people, ages and whatnot. You know, flexibility. I spoke last week to the Credit Union Association, and we talked a lot about their world, and obviously the banking world. And of course, you can't say banks in the room of credit union and vice versa, but I can for today's presentation. You think about banking, how that's changed, and who goes to a bank now, and they kind of have those 4 or 5 generations they're trying to cater to, right? And so thinking about A teller. Oh, a teller has to be there. If you're a teller, you have to be in the bank, obviously. If you're in manufacturing, we have to be at work to manufacture. There are exceptions. I mentioned earlier, our riveter and the hat manufacturer. But for the most part, if you're in manufacturing, if you're in distribution, if you're in a bank, you have to be there. So virtual might not be the option there, but flexibility in shifts is tremendous. We have one member of ours who's manufacturer of biotech. They went from 3 shifts and 40% turnover to 16 shifts and waiting lists for many of their jobs. You heard me right. I said 16. Again, it's a bear to administer, but it's helped them to attract different types of people, and they brand these shifts to different types of lifestyles. So I think flexibility can be had in any kind of job, and it's important for us to do that. And then obviously treating them well when they leave. There was a Duke study many years ago at a Duke that analyzed why people leave companies, and the number one reason and why they leave and why they end up suing the employer either for unemployment or for EEOC charges. And they found the number one determinant as to whether if someone, a former employee, files a suit was how they were treated when you actually let them go. And do we treat them with respect and dignity and help them save face, or do we kick them out the front door and have security walk them out in front of everybody? So again, treat them well, they might come back. The other big concept we see now, let's see, that we see right now is in this concept of employer of choice. Tremendous work being done right now in this world. We've talked about some of these already. Obviously, it starts with a very clear employee value proposition, clear branding, flexibility is at the heart of this right now. Every industry has their own version, either of remote work or flexibility in their work. You know, we talked about the younger generations are really into personal and professional growth. They need to see clear career paths that they can view out and see themselves with you in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. I got asked last week the question, yeah, but if we do all this development, don't we stand the chance of losing people because we may not have the jobs for them at some point? And again, part of this is thinking very creatively about what are our jobs? How can people grow horizontally and still get raises, which goes to the compensation part of the year. If the only way for me to promote myself is to get a promotion and to become a supervisor or a manager, then yeah, surely I'm going to be limited there. But we advise, how can I have people promote themselves horizontally as well? Obviously, strong people, man. Oh my gosh, tremendous stress right now on managers of people, particularly in hybrid remote areas. So I'm hoping you're doubling down on that right now. And then I would call them friendly HR policies. I mentioned earlier the different things we're seeing out there from a totality of benefits, obviously vacation, wellness programs. We're seeing all kinds of memberships now being offered by employers, whether it be Netflix or Audible or gyms, commuting perks, Uber accounts being set up. Seeing a lot of commuting assistance. Childcare is back in. Again, we know from a lot of our surveys that childcare is one of the biggest issues. And so what can we do to affect that? We've got a big survey coming out in a month on childcare to get some more thoughts around what employers are doing there. But again, that childcare and elder care are tremendous stressors for people my age, i.e. elder care. And so what are we doing to make it easier on people my age for elder care or younger employees for childcare? Pet insurance is, believe it or not, is growing. House cleaning, food Fridays, life coaching, travel discount. So we're seeing a lot of things happening out there, you know, with employers just trying to get creative. And again, it's not just let's just throw it out there and see what sticks. It's let's do the analysis and figure out where our workforce is. And we talked about surveys. What does our workforce need? What does the workforce I'm trying to attract want and need? And then I mentioned the one company that went to 16 shifts. It was well thought out, and they would brand those shifts to different types of. Okay, so you like to hunt and fish on the weekends. Here's a shift for you. You like to get up early. Here's a shift for you. They tried to attract it. You have childcare or elder care issues. Here's a shift for you. Again, trying to attract those to different types of demographics. Obviously, professional development is huge now. You've all seen this before. The 70-20-10 policy, which is, you know, development is really more about on the job. and not about going to training classes. So, I mean, keep this in mind. But I want to move right now. I'm seeing time here. We have 15 minutes left. All these good things that are happening out there. And again, remember we started today with the mindset, the hope denial. We spent the last 15 minutes on trying to be more competitive and the neat things that are happening in that world. But then a lot of employers who've done all these things, or many of these things, they've raised wages, they've adopted flexible schedules, they've increased bonuses and other incentives, they've enhanced communication, they've all this stuff, they've family-friendly policies, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Many of them are still struggling to attract and retain staff. Again, we are fighting a demographic curve here that is not in our favor. That's, again, one of those takeaways for today. This is not a fad, or fake news. That's reality. So what if you find yourself there? Then what? And I think we talk about then the word becomes transform. How do we now rebuild the organization for the future? And really 4 things here. And it really starts right here. And this sounds a little bit strategic, maybe too strategic, but a lot of people who are retiring are leaders and owners of companies, right? Who maybe their vision went when they retired. Maybe the current mission or vision of our company isn't the same as it was 10 years ago. This is a critical time for us as leaders to revisit, okay, what is our vision? We know that younger generations are attracted to companies that have a compelling reason for being as a company. Why are we here? Like I said, I spoke recently at the NCCEO conference, and they had a panel there of 5 CEOs, and they were talking about kind of the best thing they've done over the last year. One of the most compelling ones was one of our members, Bob at Design, talking about their internship programs. They're going to be at our conference, by the way. Tremendously a cool thing they've done with the internship program and made it like kind of a NFL signing day. It was a really neat thing. But all the CEOs talked about how over the last 4 or 5 years, they've really had to rethink what business they're in. One gentleman who spoke was in the auto parts business, right? And you think, well, auto parts are auto parts, right? You go to AutoZone or O'Reilly's or wherever you go to get your auto parts, right? That hasn't changed, has it? Oh my gosh, yes. And they now view their industry, their business is not auto parts, it's data. Because in their world now, being able to predict inventory levels and based on times of year and things like that, they now help their clients, which is AutoZone and whatnot, know how to stock their shelves. So this is important, I think, to start with. Why are we here? What are we trying to do? Because this is very motivating for employees to come to companies that they feel like are very involved and have a very clear mission beyond just make money or support our shareholders or whatnot. That's kind of boring. Why do we exist? And then I think this is a big one here. If you're in that camp of we just can't find people, rethinking how we operate. Whenever I get asked by CEOs, so what's the solution for talent? My one-liner is this. So this is something I want to write down. My one-liner is, you got to figure out how to do more work with less people and pay them more. You got to do more work with less people and pay them more. That is true in almost every industry right now. More work with less people and pay them more. Again, people are now a scarce resource. We have to figure this out. If you go into McDonald's in Phoenix, there are 2 stores in Phoenix, Arizona. This is the chef right here. This is a real store in McDonald's in Phoenix. They are now piloting this concept of a robot making the hamburgers. This is not science fiction. This is not the Twilight Zone. This is reality. But it's also things like more work schedule options, thinking about that, automating and upskilling where we can, reskilling / redeploying people. Never a more important time now to be reskilling and upskilling your people, because if you don't, they will do it themselves and go somewhere else. Have you been into Lowe's recently? This is a real picture I took from Lowe's. Go into Lowe's, Home Improvement, or Home Depot and try to find someone to check you out right now, meaning check you out when you're trying to check out to leave. Not going to happen. They are now almost all automated self-checkouts now. Look at, this is now Bojangles now has AI. Bojangles, Bolinda is the automated AI-driven attendant now in several Bojangles now. So again, this is hitting every industry. And we're not doing this because we want to. They're doing it because they can't find the talent. And so but what they're doing is, like I said, employ less people, pay the ones that are there more, and have more skilled positions. So again, transforming how we operate is a big part of this. I spoke at the CEO forum last year, and one of the CEOs, they had a panel on culture, and I'm sure they did not anticipate he was going to say this, but he said, I'm gonna speak on the cuff here. And we were back in around 2020, we were in that kind of denial, hoping, we couldn't believe this was happening. We kind of kept our wages, relatively flat. And then we started trying, that wasn't working. So we started getting more competitive and raising wages and whatnot. And that wasn't working. This person was in the construction supply business. He said, so now I've just paid my last down payment, or my last installment on automated equipment that's now going to automate 75% of my operations, and I'm going to have a lot fewer people. The ones that remain are now carrying laptops. But just an example of just that this was a year and a half, 2 years ago, just transforming and really being creative around how we do our business. Man, remember I gave the example of our riveter of the hat manufacturer. Again, you can really start thinking creatively about how we do what we do. Technology is now allowing us to be more creative in a lot of areas that historically required brick and mortar. They don't always require that now. It's also about being more agile, being flatter. Again, the old kind of command and control silos are not working as effectively anymore. So how can we make better, faster decisions? Think about the pace of change. I've been doing this now for 33 years. I have never in my career felt busier. We're now virtual. We still have training centers, but we're virtual now at Catapult. I've never been more busy. So from my perspective, all these innovations and technology, yes, we're efficient on tasks, but we're just piling more in, right? So as employees, never been busier, and we've got to be able to make fast, nimble decisions. This is happening in every industry. And then learning culture. Microsoft was known forever as a bunch of know-it-alls, and they are intentionally now changing their culture to a bunch of learn-it-alls. They use that word. It's on their branding internally. How can we become a learn-it-all culture? Things are changing so rapidly, day by day by day. What you knew last month or last year might be irrelevant now because things are changing so much. And so I think it's critical for us as HR leaders to be at the forefront of this. How do we help with career paths, with very defined career paths? How do we provide that development to help our employees grow? Because we know from data, if you don't do it, they will go somewhere else. So answering the question about, well, what if I do it and they leave? Well, they're going to leave any rate. So if you're doing more development, at least you got a better shot at keeping them. And then lastly, I'm looking at time here, HR. I've been doing HR now for 33 years. I've never seen so much change in this industry than the last 5 years in HR. Talent is definitely number one right now. If you think about kind of the evolution of HR as an industry, back before 1960, there were 2 HR laws. 2. You had National Labor Relations Act, and you had the Fair Labor Standards Act. So you had the union law and the overtime law, right? That was it. And now you have 52, 3, 4 federal laws. You have hundreds of state laws. So it's expected, and it's not surprising that from the 60s through to now, that HR has been very focused on compliance. I'm not saying you should get rid of that, but you got to figure out ways for talent to be the top of your list, not compliance. Again, extreme flexibility and creativity is really required from HR now, because long-term HR maxims are now just different. Like I said, the biggest one being, in my whole career, we had the jobs, you apply to work for us, we're going to put intentionally many hoops and tests and challenges so that only the best get through that process, and we can know at the end of that 3-month process we've got the best hire. That still happens in some disciplines. I'm not saying we should stop for all, but for most jobs, no, it's upside down from that. It's quick, it's easy, it's fast. And I think it's important that we design HR/people processes that are aligned with our future culture. It's a 95-5 rule. You might have 5% of your employees trying to take advantage of things, but most employees aren't. And let's design our policies to them to attract either our current culture or the culture we want. Again, being agile, flexible, and reasonable versus being bureaucratic and consistent. You just cannot survive today in the talent world if your primary orientation is bureaucracy and consistency. That does not fit both what CEOs need, what the workforce requires now. We've got to be agile and flexible. So with that, this is a big deal. It's not going away. This is not a fad. It's not fake news. Those who adapt and change will win. Those that don't will get bought or go out of business. And it's happening. Every region of the country faces different challenges. We're fortunate here where we are to get a lot of in-migration, but we still can't outrun the demographic changes. We've got to figure out how to get more done with less people and pay the ones that stay more. All talent is not equal. So this tendency to want to be consistent in everything and treat everybody the same, they're not the same. We've got to challenge that in reasonable ways. I'm not being unreasonable, but in reasonable ways. And again, never let a good person go. Think about those retirees that want to do something for you and have all kinds of knowledge. Why not figure out a way to let them somehow be engaged with you as a 1099 or as an employee, whatever you have to do to make it work for them. Again, that's another example where it's challenging long-term HR. Oh no, we have these types of job. We have a full-time or part-time. We don't have gig. You got to think about that as you think about some of these people that would love to help you, but just don't want to be engaged in the traditional way you might think about engagement. And with all that, if we can help you, we're here to help. Obviously, Catapult is a 65-year-old new company, I like to say, to help you with all these challenges, whether it be compliance or talent. You've seen our chart here, for example. We find ourselves in most of the HR employee life cycle. We have some types of solutions there and happy to help you. And I mentioned earlier that we have our conference coming up. Very excited about this. For those of you in the Raleigh, Greensboro markets, we had this for 35 years or so in a row. And of course, COVID changed the world. And so we're now bringing it back. If you're in the Charlotte area and other areas, welcome you to be here to this event. We're bringing in a lot of national thought leaders from all around the country that are going to pack this 2-day conference with a lot of thought leadership. So love to see you there. It will be both in person in Greensboro and virtually. I'd love to see you in Greensboro in next year. So with that, a couple of minutes left. I've not seen any questions there. I'm looking at the chat here. I hope you found some value today in this, just to kind of challenge how you might be thinking, how your companies might be thinking. Again, happy to, if you have any questions, you want to follow up with me, happy to help you. If I need to come talk to your leadership team, I'm happy to do that. We do that quite frequently as we all try to figure out the future of work and what it means for us going forward. So we're at 2 minutes. Any questions there, Joni? Are you still with me?
We have one question that just came in.
All right.
Curious if anyone has done the Netflix incentive.
If you've done the Netflix incentive, put it in the chat. Interesting. We've seen is one thing we've seen, for example, one of our business lines runs FSA accounts. We also have these new things called lifestyle accounts that some employers are doing. They do a lifestyle account that we run for them, and employees use that for various things, like Netflix, like Uber, like whatever. That's one option. Of course, there's no tax advantages of that, but it does make it easier for them to pay for various lifestyle things. That'd be one thing. I don't see him. There's anybody in the chat doing Netflix?
No, we don't have anybody.
Okay. Let's put that in one of our surveys then. Okay, well, we are at time now. Thanks again for playing along today. I hope you took a few takeaways out of here. Again, if we can help, let us know. Otherwise, have a great holiday season. I can't believe it's almost 2024. We'll be here before you know it. So have a great holiday season, and we'll see you when we see you. Take care.